Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Thank you for tuning in. Today we are working on Mike's S14 again. For those of you that saw the last time we worked on the S14, we pretty much finished the Kouki conversion. I mean, yeah, there's still a few more little things we need to do, but the bulk of the conversion is done. However, we ran into an issue. In those same videos, we were not only doing the Kouki conversion, we were also working on the engine a little bit, and we pretty much redid his entire cooling system. I'm not talking about the AC, I'm talking about the engine cooling system. So he's got a new radiator, new fans, new thermostat, new water pump, and he's still overheating. We did some testing on the engine, and I've now come to believe that he has a bad head gasket. Exhaust gases are getting into the water system, that's why he's overheating. So today we are going deep on this car. We're gonna be taking off the intake, the exhaust, the upper timing chain, removing the whole head. We have a metal head gasket for him, and we're also gonna upgrade his head studs to APR head studs so they won't stretch, which means in the future, if he wants to run more power or boost, we can do that without having to worry about lifting the head. However, two things before we get started. One, if you do like automotive, particularly GTR, and of course S14 content, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And two, if you'd like to support the channel, I do have the JD Archer shop. If you go to jdarcher.bigcartel.com, you can see a limited section of t-shirts I've designed that are for sale. Go ahead and check it out. If there's anything you want to buy, all proceeds go to fund either modifications to this car or the GTRs. But with that out of the way, we got a lot of work today. So the first thing we're going to do is actually take off the hood. This isn't a requirement for doing a head gasket, but it is going to make your life a lot easier, especially when it comes to lifting that head off. Yep. So it's kind of cool, they have these clips right here that holds the wire harness. All you need to do is just pretty much, there's like a tab you can either pull with your finger. I like to use a screwdriver, just makes it easier. It releases basically their version of the zip tie, this comes loose. All right, so as a bit of an update, we have taken off the wiring harness to get that clear. Just as a heads up, there are two bolts back here that are 12 millimeter that hold grounds. You're gonna want to disconnect. We've soaked these nuts in PB Blaster because those are gonna come off later. And we have taken off all the bolts for the valve cover. So the valve cover is gonna come off. I've pretty much determined at this point in time, I'm gonna leave the intake on to take this off. I'm gonna do this for a couple of reasons. One, it's gonna be easier because you'll have, you know, there's some things you have to get into to get this whole thing off, so just take it off as one unit. The second thing is it is going to make it more heavy because obviously this has weight, but I think it's just going to be easier in the long run. So we're going to take off the exhaust manifold, but leave the intake manifold. So like I said, it's going to be heavier, but then we don't have to worry about taking off like the fuel rail and getting underneath to the bolts that are attaching it to the head. As you can see, we've also already taken out the wires and the spark plugs. So what we'll do is before we take it off, I'm gonna line up the timing marks with the cam marks. As you know from a previous video, the teeth are off, so also doing the head gasket means we're gonna properly do the upper timing chain so I get rid of our timing issue and hopefully just gets rid of a lot of the issues with the car. Work that way. All right, valve cover off. Oh, that's gonna work. All right, so before we start taking too much stuff off, one of the things I'm trying to do is line up everything to top dead center. So what I've done is top dead center is marked on the sprocket right here. There's the timing mark right here, this little needle. So that means that as far as the crank goes, it's a top dead center. And then what I do is I look and there's some divots in these gears. There's one right there, and this one's a little more visible right here. Now, one of the things that tells us that whoever did the timing chain did it wrong is this little divot right here should be lined up. See how this link is darker than all the other ones? it should be lined up with this. And then see this divot right here should also be lined up with the dark link where the rest are normal. Now apparently this happens is if you put on the timing chain and you put on the tensioner and you cycle it through, sometimes when you cycle it through, it tightens up this side and it throws it off by a tooth. So what it means is when they put on this upper timing chain, they didn't cycle it to check to make sure that everything was correct. And that's part of the reason why we're having issues timing this. We can't get it timed properly is because it's off by a tooth. Very common mistake to make, especially if whoever did it didn't know what they were doing or were just being lazy and didn't want to cycle through to check it. So one of the advantages about doing the head gasket today as well is we're going to make sure that timing chain is done properly. So we've actually decided it's probably going to be easier to take the actual intake manifold off. So what we're doing right now is we are loosening up the fuel rail, getting all of these, you got one here and you got one here. So what we've done is we originally tried to pull this soft rubber hose off. It just wasn't going to happen. It's too short of a gap. So what we've done is we've loosened up the fuel line here. There's 2 more bolts here, and that should loosen up the whole thing. And then the idea is there's another bolt here and here that are already out. We'll pull the fuel line, clear it, and then once we clear the fuel line, all we have to do is take off this water line here, and I think there's 2 more lines right here. Clear those, and then we can start taking off the bolts to get the entire intake manifold. Now we're not taking it completely out of the car, we're just moving it out of the way so that when we do actually get to taking off the head, we'll be able to do that. While he's working on the fuel rail and the intake manifold, I'm going to start working on taking off this front timing cover. Do you have zip ties? All right, so this front plate's almost ready to come off. There's been 12mm bolts all through here, and then there's 2 10mm bolts back here after we took off the distributor. Mike is currently wrestling with the fuel rail. Now the annoying thing about this front cover is those 12mm bolts are like all different lengths. So I've kind of created a pattern here so I know I go basically all the way around this way and then all my lengths should be correct. So this is really hard to get off, but if you look here on the back side, let me make sure I can see what I'm doing. So right here, there's kind of like this little indentation, and it's perfect for fitting a screwdriver. See, there's like the little indentation right there. Gives you enough just to get right in there, and it gives you enough leverage to pop it loose. So if you've seen other videos on how to do the timing chain cover, that's the secret right there. The tensioner here for the chain, so you're going to want to take the pressure off the tensioner. I'll make it easier to get the chain off. You push this down, there's a little hole right here in this black box. So if you get something to push in there, it should loosen up the chain. So I got to find something to stick in that little hole. So as an update, what we've done, or I've done, is I've taken off the guides. As you can see, the tensioner's gone, the guide here's gone, the guide here is gone. Those were just some 10mm, came off pretty easily. The next plan is to take off this bolt right here. Apparently, one of the things that you want to do is there's another tensioner down here for the lower chain. Now, unfortunately, Nissan, in their infinite wisdom, made it so you can't change this lower timing chain unless you actually take the engine out of the car. It goes partially into the oil pan. You have to take the oil pan off to get to it. So we're not going to mess with that. But this does apparently need to come off to get the head out. So next is going to be this bolt right here, which, if I remember right, is like a 19. And then I'm going to use some zip ties to basically tie this up so that it doesn't slip off of the sprocket down below. All right, so Mike injured himself a little bit. He's getting some Band-Aids. He'll be back shortly. He's still working on the intake manifold. I need either a small piece of solder or a needle, because as you saw with the tensioner for the upper timing chain, I need to do the same thing for the lower timing chain. I don't have anything for right now. So I've decided what I'm going to do is, since how all this is off, I'm going to start working on taking off the camshafts. Now I'm going to do this one at a time. It's very important that as stuff comes off, it goes back in the exact same position it was in when you put it back on the car. So you want to keep track of, you know, what was what. Now, fortunately, Nissan did something really cool here to make that easy for you, is they labeled them. So this right here has an E, this one has an E2, an E3, E4, E5, E6. So it's kind of makes it a little bit less idiot-proof for putting them in the wrong way. The other thing is there's arrows engraved above this that point towards the front of the engine, so you know which way they go on too, so you don't swap them around. Same here with I, so you have I for intake, so you have I, I2, I3, I4, I5, I6, and once again it has arrows pointing towards the front of the engine. Now when you take these off, you start from the outside, work your way in. Now you don't just take them all the way out, you back them off a little bit, you back them off a little bit, because you want this camshaft to come up. It's under tension from the springs below. You want it to come up evenly, because if it comes up like, say like I took these off and these are still tight, it could actually break your camshaft. So this is going to be a bit of a slower process, but if done right, your camshaft should come out okay. So on this pass, I'm literally just breaking them loose. Okay, so from the feel of things, the camshaft is properly loose, which means now I can just take them all off. Now that we got all the retainers off, the camshaft should just come right on out like that. All right, now I'm going to do the same thing to the exhaust side. You saw what I did with the intake. I'll go ahead and turn off the camera. There's no reason for you to watch me take off, or the exhaust, you know, there's no reason for you to take off the intake. As you can see now, we have both the camshafts out. We pretty much have everything off of this. The only thing we have left to do is get this sprocket off, which the hang up there is the tensioner for this chain. Has an itty bitty little hole. We're trying to find something strong enough that if we put it in there, will hold the tensioner, so we can then get all that off. Then all we have to do is take off the intake and the exhaust manifold, and this head's ready to come off. New head gasket on and put everything back together. We'll show you, of course, the head bolts are in here. Now, apparently I made the mistake. I thought Mike had ordered head studs from APR. Apparently he's not. He just got replacement Nissan head bolts. So there will be that different. You know, usually if you were going to do the APR head studs, you would screw them into the block, and then this slides over the studs. With the bolts, you have to kind of line up everything, run the bolts through, torque them down in a particular way, and we'll show you the pattern and the torque specs when we get to that point. So while I'm waiting for Mike to come back and work on those, I'm going to go ahead and just disconnect the exhaust manifold. They're 14 millimeters. We already hit them with PB Blaster earlier today to let them soak, and so in theory, these should all come off nice and easy. Fortunately for these top ones, you can just get in here with a breaker bar. The lower ones might not be so friendly. right, so we used the tool you get on your cell phone when you're gonna take the SIM card out. We used that on the tensioner on the lower chain. So now we're gonna take this sprocket off, and then literally I got the exhaust manifold off already. All we're missing is the intake manifold, and we are ready to replace the head gasket. Now here's the part where you want to be a little bit tricky. You don't want to drop this chain. All right, now time to break the head bolts loose. I've already done the middle ones. Let's find out. That one's got a washer. Little bit of an update. So we actually did get the head off. It was actually not that bad of a job. Pretty darn straightforward. If you have even moderate experience working on cars, this is something you can do, just takes a little bit of time. One of the things that we found that made this a lot easier was one of the hardest things was getting this intake off. The reason why there's a whole bunch of bolts underneath here, which are a real pain to get to, especially on the far side close to the firewall. So what we did is we actually took off this bolts here, separated the intake after I took off the head bolts, and what that did is it allowed us to rotate the head and get at those bolts and get the intake off. So if this is something you're gonna do, if you don't have an aftermarket intake, I recommend at least attempting that. It made things a lot easier. The issue that we ran into though is where we took apart the intake from the lower intake and against the block was a stock paper gaskets, and they tore when we took it apart, and we don't have replacements. It's a holiday today, so we're not gonna be able to get them, so we're kind of stuck and done for today. But all in all, not too bad. Now, the issue I see it is we originally did this because we wanted to look at this head gasket to see if maybe it had popped, and that's why we are having the overheating issues. Unfortunately, looking at it, it doesn't look like that is the case. So I don't know whether or not, once we actually put the metal head gasket on, if that is actually gonna fix Mike's issue. So stay tuned to the next video to see if, when we finish this, if that fixes the cooling issue or we still got to explore. I still don't think this was a bad thing to do though. The engine's got like 200,000 miles on it. We don't know the history of the car, plus we're replacing it with a metal head gasket, so it's gonna be even better. So even though this might not fix the problem, I still think it was a good thing to do to this car. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, go hit that thumbs up button to let me know. It does help the channel out a lot. As I did say at the beginning of the video, if you'd like to see more automotive, particularly GTR, and of course, S14 content, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. You can also follow me on all forms of social media, which include Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. There'll be links for all those in the description down below. Now, after watching this video, if you have any questions, if there's something we missed, if there's something we could have done to make this easier, or something we did that was absolutely dangerous and we shouldn't have done it that way, post in the comment section down below. I will respond to you. I thank you all for watching, and until next time, forget everything else, focus on the finish line.